You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.
Hello and welcome to Campus Talks, the Times Higher Education podcast in which we ask experts from around the world to share insights and advice to support the work of academics and university staff. I'm Eliza Compton, Deputy Editor of Campus. The topic for this episode is university outreach, what it is, the benefits for institutions and individual academics, and the skills required to do it well. Broadly speaking, outreach describes the activities through which universities share their research and expertise with groups beyond the institution. This might come in the form of school visits and science demonstrations, but it also might be workshops, campus tours, online resources, summer school, or festivals. This work often links to universities' mission to widen participation and provide value to their communities, as well as to inspire children, teenagers, and others to pursue higher education. And it is effective. When the Higher Education Access Tracker Service compared progression rates of students in 2025, it found that students eligible for free school meals engaging in intensive outreach were up to 48% more likely to progress to higher education. As you'll hear, outreach is a complex undertaking that requires a high level of collaboration and is enriched by interdisciplinarity and co-creation. And these are elements that inspire my guest today. Lorraine Coghill is the Deputy Director of Science Engagement based in the Department of Physics at Durham University in the northeast of England. She has a PhD in biomedical and clinical laboratory sciences from the University of Edinburgh and over 20 years of educational engagement experience working with schools, universities, science centres, festivals and educational and community organisations in the UK and Europe. She also contributes to a range of national and international engagement initiatives, including as an advisor to Project Earth, which unites young people from around the world to address climate change, training educators in the primary science capital approach, and serving as co-chair of the Space North East England Skills and Outreach Group. I was really keen to talk to Lorraine about Durham's Star Goal project, an initiative that brings together football, physics and gender representation in sport. Quite the topical combination. Created with Catchgate Primary School and other partners, it won the Partnering with Schools category at the 2024 Ogden Trust Outreach Awards. And it gave its young participants an enviable insight into cosmology, the mechanics of kicking a ball and what a film crew does. But I started by asking Lorraine how she distinguishes outreach from other forms of engagement. Hi Lorraine, and welcome to Campus Talks.
Hi Eliza, it's fantastic to be here. Thank you for asking me.
For my own understanding, as much as our audiences, what's the difference between outreach and public engagement?
Oh, hours, if not days, weeks of my life have been spent discussing the terminology. To give a kind of very rough outline of it, I think with outreach, what it tends to be is about taking knowledge, taking research, taking expertise to a particular audience, to a particular group. Particularly groups that may not necessarily have access to those resources or perhaps may be underrepresented. So often focuses on the kind of informing, educating, raising awareness, that type of thing. So really good examples might be things like school visits or science demonstrations or workshops and things like that. Whereas public engagement is much more focused on a two-way interaction. So it's looking at how can we have dialogue with people and actually involve them in the whole process of a particular program or project or research and have that kind of mutual understanding and mutual learning from each other. So examples of that might be things like a citizen science project where citizens are working alongside researchers or being the researchers on a particular program. However, for us at Durham, we had sort of big discussion about this. And although a lot of our programs still kind of that traditional outreach space, actually what we're trying to do is shift that from being that one-way interaction to actually, even when it might be more traditional outreach projects, of making sure that they are developed with a particular group. So that co-creation and that collaboration really comes as part of the planning and part of the delivery of the whole project as well. So that's why we decided to not be science outreach, but science engagement as our title.
That makes complete sense. So, creating pathways for people to connect with what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's that idea that there's so much different forms of expertise. People have lived experience in different areas, trying to understand each other and where we're coming from, and actually how can we collaborate together for a much richer program or much richer project. And those longer term relationships are able to develop, I think, much more strongly from that starting point.
Mm. I mean, I can definitely see the value of outreach in terms of communicating with the public about what you do, but also providing students with a clearer pathway to higher education. So, why do universities do outreach in terms of an institutional benefit beyond student recruitment? And why do individual scientists or scholars do it?
Gosh, it's a very big question.
Sorry.
No, it's a great question. I think, and it's fundamental to why we do it and why we're here and why there's people like me in institutions that are employed to do this. And I think you hit on it in terms of like institutionally. I think there's kind of there's educational reasons why we do it. So it is sharing the knowledge and sharing the expertise. It is about that widening participation and access. Point of making sure that we are working alongside people to show that it is an opportunity if you want to go to university and if you want to study. It is also that kind of inspiration piece as well sometimes, isn't it, in seeing and meeting different people from different backgrounds. But I think there's also the social aspect of it as well is really important. So actually demonstrating that worth to society of actually the sort of that wider social and cultural questions, whether that's around sort of environment or the contribution that universities make towards a lot wider cultural sort of discussions and the ecosystem around that, and also the economics of things too. And I think there is also strategic points too, though, that it is really important that we do develop really good relationships with communities, whether that be regionally, nationally, even internationally, but also those relationships with different organisations, whether that be councils or charities, governments. And really, that kind of bigger piece then supports universities in being able to recruit, whether that be staff or students, but also the reputation of the institution as well. The fact that what you are doing in that engagement space says a lot about who you are as an institution.
Mm.
And then from an individual point, well, this is actually a question that we always ask the staff or students who take part in our training. Why do you want to do this? And we get such wide different responses that, it's good for skills development. They want to be able to understand their own research better and get different perspectives on from different groups who will have very different perspectives on the research to people within your bubble of your research. That potentially that might be a challenge as well that they want to face and experience. They also talk about, building their network and building their opportunities and looking at career progression. Then there's also those kind of internal, very sort of fundamental reasons why people do it. People are really enthusiastic about their area of research, whatever that is. And they really want to sort of share that enthusiasm with other people too. So ways of giving that back. And often when you have conversations with people about those kind of inner motivations to do it, they do talk about the opportunities that they had and their journeys into their career. And often as well, there's things like increasing diversity of they see these things as being really important about how when they were younger, maybe they didn't have role models that represented them, and they want to do that. But one of the things that often comes up as well is the joy and the enjoyment. That it's often an opportunity to give a little bit of yourself to your job that's not, within the day job. They get to give different aspects of themselves. Often they are fun as well, which is important.
And is the joy part of the reason why you got into it?
Oh my goodness, yes. I was a biomedical science researcher and really enjoyed the research. But I actually got more and more involved in doing things like teaching, and I got opportunities to, because of the institution I was at, they were very keen on that engagement side of things. So doing things like running workshops with young people, running public debates, which was a little bit more challenging, but around particular areas. And so for me, I realized actually that human connection with people was incredibly important to me. So I was able to use those skills that I developed through my PhD, but also then bring in lots of different skills and work with different groups. So I was lucky enough to then work in science centres and look at interdisciplinary, how, the arts can work together with sciences, for example.
There's so many reasons to engage in outreach. So let's talk about how you actually do it. I wanted to start with the challenges. What's the hardest part about organising an outreach project?
Um, so um, I will start that off by saying that it is a really positive job, and it is really, you do get that joy and that satisfaction from working with different groups. But I don't know if it's a slight cop out to say that time is a major factor within this constantly, because it is based around developing relationships and understanding with people. That does take time to develop, which you need to make sure that you factor in with all the other pressures of other things that you're running alongside as well. Because you do want to make sure that you're valuing people and that they feel valued and they feel involved, but you do want it to be a longer term relationship. So that is something that really, really takes time. And you want to make sure that, ethically, that you're doing things right and fairly, that nothing feels kind of extractive. And because of the outputs that we're often looking for, there are things like, how do you demonstrate impact when you're looking for confidence development, or considering going into university if that is a goal of it, or developing skills. These are things that takes a long time. So often in terms of evaluation, ensuring that you've got enough evidence for these things having value, sometimes it's just impossible because it's too long term. But it's trying to make those statements based on what information you can get within the timeframes and the constraints that you have. So we know these things do brilliant jobs, but we want to be as good as we possibly can at saying how they've done it and why they've done that.
Mm. And when you're thinking of putting together a project, I mean, Durham has a really broad range of very successful projects that cover all sorts of things from cosmology to monitoring local wildlife. Do you start with the kinds of things that you were just talking about? So thinking about pathways to university or developing confidence in, let's say, a school group, or do you begin with a piece of research that you think would be useful to share with local schools or integrate somehow into the local curriculum?
I think it's fair to say each project is quite different in how it comes about. Often, though, it's a case of, again, I'm going to go back to people and having those conversations with researchers to understand really what was it they're trying to achieve, what is it they're interested in. Understanding the research, yes, but also understanding who they are as a person and what's going to motivate them to think about further engagement and impact. And also, the sort of flip side of that is also having the community partners and then understanding what it is that they're looking for as well. So sometimes projects will come about because a community group will be like, we're really interested in this particular topic. Is there a way that we can work with you and develop that? So sometimes it will come from that direction as well. I think that what's really kind of fair to say, though, it's got to come from like, why are we doing it? What is the purpose of it? And what is it that we're wanting to achieve? And what will the people who are involved in that project, what will they get out of being involved in it?
So that really important question of why. So let's, which seems straightforward, but actually there's so many different components to that, isn't there? Let's talk about something concrete. Durham's Project Star Goal, which has won an Ogden Trust Outreach Award, is I think, ingenious sounding piece of outreach, which links football to physics and to astronomy. And I think, and there's a bit of an element of looking at the sociology of sport in there as well, in thinking about women's sport and how that sits within the sports fandom. And I was watching one of the videos on the website, and the kids in the classroom were so enthusiastic. Like, it was amazing to see a whole classroom of hands shoot up when they were asked a question about the force that propels a ball through the air. How did Star Goal come about?
Oh, well, Stargell is a really good example of something coming, if you'll pardon the football analogy, from left field. So Alice Deason, who was the PI, so the primary investigator on that project, she originally kind of came up to me and said, Lorraine, I've got some funding that I need to spend. Can you just take it? It's great, but actually that's not really what I'm about. I'm about supporting other people to work with them to finding out actually what is it that's going to engage you, what's going to be interesting to you in your research area. And so Alice talked so enthusiastically about her research. And at the end of the conversation, she was like, I've got to nip off now because the Women's World Cup's on. And I used to play football and I really excited. And her eyes just lit up. So even though she missed the beginning of the football, we then started talking about her interest in football. And then also the conversations developed really around the issues around, lack of gender representation, perhaps in some areas, those overlaps between in football and in physics. And so this was such a good starting point because I knew that we have had similar conversations within sociology. So one of our researchers, her whole area is around women's experience of football and football fandom. We also have, and we're very lucky in Durham, we have a fantastic women's football team. We have a fantastic sports department that were keen to work with us. And also, one of my other hats is coordinating the Durham Primary Science Network. So having the wonderful Catchgate Primary School, and Liam from there, he is the science lead and also the PE lead. So it just seems to be one of these projects that all of the people were in the right place at the right time. And we also were able to then bring in Durham County Council's education lead as well to look at, well, how can we make this something that is meaningful to everybody who's involved in it, but also could be used for other people beyond as well. So really those kind of starting conversations between different people with a shared passion, a shared interest in football and space, and the gender balance as well within sports and science, meant they all came together to result in what was a wonderful experience for us, and such a privilege to work alongside the most enthusiastic young people. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been involved, Eliza, in filming before. It takes a lot of patience. They started the whole project thinking that they'd all like to be footballers and film study people. And then actually by the end of it, they didn't want to do the film, which wasn't really our intention. But it had kind of opened their eyes to sort of different opportunities within lots of different areas as well. So it was really, yeah, it was a joy to work with everybody on that.
Yeah, so I imagine that working with schools has a whole range of issues that come up. But one particular aspect I was interested in was the co-creation element, which I understand was quite important with Star Goal. So, am I right in thinking that? And how does that work?
Yeah, co-creation is such a easy thing to say and a difficult thing to do, I think is fair for it to be genuine co-creation. So if I use Star Goal as an example of that, the young people within the school was about sitting with them and exploring what they knew about space already, what their interests, what they thought was interesting, and then also asking them what they thought about football and what was interesting. So kind of like workshopping where their interests were, what things that they thought about, what career opportunities did they think would result from doing these different things, and kind of having that, relationship development with them. And then taking those ideas and workshopping those with the researchers as well as a film production company as well. So bringing everything together. So it did take a period of time, and then the filming element of it was kind of like the end of that process.
I can see so many ways to help students because they're what, year 6 and 7, years 5 and 6?
They were year 5 and 6, and we had some bonus year fours join us as well. So.
So at that age, you have had fairly limited experience of the world. And it seems to me that with Star Goal, you have football is a way to very concretely connect the kinds of science that you're talking about with a shared joyful experience. But also then you come into contact with university researchers. You've got film production. You may have someone sitting on the side thinking, well, I'm not really that interested in football, but I really want to know what that camera person is doing. So this is what I think. I think this project is so interesting. Is it still going?
Yes, well, we're not developing any new resources at present, but certainly if any schools or community groups are interested in working with the team, absolutely. The astronomers are still there. They're still very enthusiastic about football, and so are the team at in sports as well. So if anyone was interested, they can absolutely get in contact with us, and we will make ways of them getting involved with us. But if they can't get to us in Durham, then the resources are still very much online, and people can use those. Please do use them. Please do get in touch with us and say whether they work or they don't work for you. And we're very up for adapting things as well, and hopefully get to the next stage of the project as well, whatever that be.
Yeah, because you've got videos that with discussion prompts as well as I think lesson plans when I had a look. I think follow-up is one of the things, one of the challenges around outreach, which is how to take a project beyond a one-off. How do you come at that challenge? What are your tips and advice around making sure the impact continues or helping the impact to continue?
Yeah, Eliza, it's such an important thing. And I think this is one of the things that really has to be considered right from the start of any project. It has to be planned in. So you might talk about like a theory of change, or what is it that you want everyone to get from the project, but also where are they going to go on to next, and in planning that in. And I think many of the projects that we do, and actually it's quite interesting, particularly working with students. They want to jump into the process of like, I've got this really good idea, for example, I want to use animation to do this, without taking that step back to think, what is it that we want to, what is the aims, what's the purpose of what we're doing, and who are the people we're working with, and what do they get from it? So making sure you start with that and think about how you're going to evaluate it going through. Um, and I think it's fair to say, particularly if you're working in that community space, and particularly around creative projects, which I love doing. I love when we don't know the definite end point. We're like, what's it going to look like? That sometimes that has to be it's an iterative process, and you have to adapt and change and be responsive to what's happening. But I think as long as you've constantly got that as something you are evaluating, whether that's, internally remembering, or you are recording that in some way. Because of the nature of it, sometimes some projects, it will be the legacy might be something like you're leaving links or film footage, for example, there, or you've put them in touch with another organization, or they're now working in a different area. Sometimes it's harder to unpick that, because sometimes you're often looking for things like, they're developing confidence or agency or skills development. So that might be something you're kind of might be sort of leaving them with, but you hope that that will carry on. And also around sort of awareness, you mentioned it earlier, Eliza, around career opportunities or things that doors that could be open to them if they chose to take that particular route. But I think what's really important though is I go back to relationships again, is that knowing that they've always got an open door to us at the university, that they can get in touch and be like, Lorraine, do you know anyone who would do this? Or do you happen to know if there's some funding somewhere to do this? Or have you heard the news? And having that opportunity to be open and that you know that you're there for them as much as you can contact them in the future as well.
Mm. And I imagine that the ongoing relationships like that are part of the measure of the success of the project as well, is that if you have partners who want to continue to work with you and keep the doors open, that's a tick.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's such a measure, and it's always lovely as well to even like a while after a particular project's happened, that people will still get in contact with you and say, "Oh, we've done this or we've done that," and yeah, that gives a huge amount of satisfaction as well. Yeah, it's a good measure of impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine you have people coming to you wanting to start projects, launch projects. What kind of skills do they need in order to succeed?
Again, it does depend on what it is that they're looking to do and what they were looking to achieve. But I would certainly say that good things to do if they are looking to develop is to find out what's already out there. So being quite curious and investigating. It could even be a case of finding out what's already at your own institution and what's on offer and what is in the wider sphere as well. There's lots of, people like me at different institutions, and they're often great for saying, have you thought about this? Or I think it's really important to understand the principles of outreach, the principles of public engagement. So really understanding the purpose of what you're doing and considering that people-centered approach. So being open to having conversations, being open to not necessarily being the expert in the room sometimes as well, whether that be community groups or whatever it is. So that understanding of groups, participants, audiences. Most universities will offer training in things like communication skills, but actually thinking about communication in terms of that two-way interaction. So thinking about it in terms of engagement. How are you going to ensure that whatever it is that you're doing is actually going to be like connecting and linking with the groups that you're working with? And then there's all the really kind of nitty-gritty stuff. Like you still need to be thinking about design, project management, health and safety, risk assessment, funding, safeguarding, ethics, all of that stuff still happens and still needs to be done as well. So there's quite a lot of skills within it. But ultimately, I'd say like starting point of like, what is it that you want to achieve and how do you want to get there?
And then start putting it together piece by piece. Just as a final question, I believe that your current project or new project is your planetarium dome, which is a co-venture with Newcastle. So just to finish, I thought we would project out into the future, which seems correct for a science-based conversation. So can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, we have been lucky enough to have an inflatable planetarium dome at Durham for many years. And I think it's fair to say it had a few extra holes in there. So maybe it looked like a few extra stars when you were inside. But it was also, you had to crawl through the dome in order to get in. So that obviously is not as accessible as we would like. So we're incredibly lucky. We have the Northeast universities. We like to work together. We like to see how we can collaborate on different programs. So Newcastle University and ourselves are collaborating on this. We've also got funding support from a few different organisations as well, the Hadrian Trust and the William and Frances Dobie Foundation. And we were able to purchase a brand new dome that has a zip up, so you can enter whether you're standing up, whether you're in a wheelchair. It's a bit bigger as well. I am slightly nervous about those smaller community centres and school halls, but I'm reassured that it'll be there. We've also got some new software and some new hardware as well. So it just means that the experience of being in the dome and feeling as though you're in space will really be enhanced by this. Being in pure darkness, like experiencing the wonders of space. Many of us don't have the ability, to street lighting makes it really hard to experience that. And it is quite a magical thing to go into a dome. So we're really pleased to be able to be looking at that, to take that to more groups, more audiences, more participants. But we're also looking at how could we use it more creatively as well. So at Durham, we're involved in a few different programs that link the culture sector with science together. So watch this space.
It might be a hyperbole to say out of this world, but maybe not inappropriate.
Oh, love it. Thank you, Eliza.
Thank you so much for your time today, Lorraine. It's been really interesting talking to you. Lorraine's enthusiasm for her role and what outreach brings to the university, its scholars and the community is evident, and her advice feeds into that joy without glossing over the challenges. It's clear that the key to initial success and lasting impact is building relationships and clarity about objectives. Whether the catalyst for your outreach project is research or a school request, the first question should be, what do I want to achieve with this work? Collaboration and establishing lasting partnerships takes time, as does tracking outcomes, but the rewards are evident. So that's it for this episode of Campus Talks. I'd like to thank Lorraine Coghill from Durham University for sharing her insights with us. If you would like more insight for designing and running a successful university outreach, you'll find articles by experts from around the world in our latest Campus Spotlight Guide. Go to timeshighereducation.com/campus. You'll also find a link to StarGoal's online resources in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or colleagues, like, subscribe, or leave us a comment, and we'll be back with more advice on university best practice in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.